Okay, everyone's audio should be coming through. You all should see us popping up just now. Hello, everybody. We are just now
Hello.
starting the stream. How you doing, Mike?
Doing great. Feeling good. Excited to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on. How you doing, Ghazi?
Doing fantastic as always. How are you doing, DM?
I'm doing wonderful. So, as is tradition with these, we're going to do a quick intro here. Everyone in the chat I see is telling us the audio's here and everything's looking good. So we're going to do this in the same vein that we've done all of these. And for the people that maybe haven't seen this before, this is Tavern Talk. This is not some super hardcore official scripted anything. We have some questions we're going to ask our good boy Mike here. I will ask the more like intro ones for the people that are looking into the game, maybe haven't played it so much. We have GHAZZY, who's participated all the way through the game and knows all of the in-game content as well as done races, etc. He will ask the questions that the people that are really into the game already are looking to see, and that's sort of how we split these types of things up. Like I said, we have no topics ever required to kind of go through here. So Mike, if you have anything you want to say during this, if you have a tangent you want to go on, anything like that, feel free. And with that intro, good morning. Thanks for coming, everybody. And I'm going to start it off with GHAZZY.
GHAZZY. I just have a quick introduction question to start this off with, and that is, we have the game launching in February. It's soon. The anticipation, it's high. Now, how are you guys feeling? Are you feeling nervous about it? Like, how's the setting in the atmosphere in the office right now for you guys?
I mean, it's very high energy. It's a lot for everyone. For some of us, it's our first game, like big game launch like this, where there's a lot of eyes on it, and you never really know how it's gonna go, and confidence is high, but it's a lot of energy, and I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, you're not alone. I think we're all very excited.
Yeah.
New game launches are always hype. And my understanding is you guys have a pretty small team over there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to gauge size of teams. But yeah, we've like in the grand scheme of things for like how big I think this game's getting and going to be, I think we have a relatively pretty small team.
And you have some really ambitious projects. For instance, the most latest news you guys dropped was about the trade and item factions. That's the sort of the big talking point right now. And so I was going to get it started on that topic since it's the most relevant, related news at the moment. When it comes to trade and item factions, one of the questions I saw, which I believe was answered in the video, but I just want to make sure we're correct on this because I'm seeing this question all the time, is that when it comes to the market and trading, the currency that you use to actually do the trading, is that faction reputation currency, or is that only a fee associated with having to post, for instance, a marketplace posting? Could you maybe give us a little bit more deep dive into trading and item factions?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. There's actually three things going on in total with the factions, or specifically with the trade faction. So Merchants Guild, the primary currency that you're going to use to trade with is gold. That's what you post something up and you say, this is how much gold I want for this item. When you go to buy something, you say, this is how much gold I'm spending to buy this thing. That's the thing you're getting in exchange for the item is gold every single time. The second thing that you mentioned was reputation. And reputation is actually the reward for trading. It's not the cost. So reputation is what you get out of completing a trade. And that's how you progress into higher ranks of your faction. The other currency item it's not really a currency, but the other resource is favor. And favor is something that you earn by playing the game while you're representing one of the factions. And so while you're representing Merchants Guild and you just go out, you complete quests, you kill monsters, you do echoes, you do dungeons, anything you're doing earns you favor. And there will be a favor cost associated with interacting with your faction in any way. So if you're buying something, if you're selling something, that costs favor to take those actions. But favor's not being exchanged, so it's not really the currency you're trading with.
Okay, got it. So you earn the favor by doing the thing, and the thing being, for instance, in Trade League would be trading, obviously, and then once you have the favor, you use that to interact with the different factions. Am I hearing this correctly? I'm trying to process.
Close. So you earn favor by killing monsters.
Okay,
yeah,
so
that's it. That's just like you kill 1,000 monsters, you get a bunch of favor, and then when you're like, okay, I got the sword that I want to go sell, you need to have enough favor to sell that sword.
Oh, okay, got it. Huh.
Yeah.
That's sort of an interesting.
Like based then.
Sorry.
Would that be tier based? So you need to reach certain levels to sell certain items. Is that for rarity or?
Yeah, so we're actually in the we're taking a little bit of a look at some of the feedback we're getting, because we are getting a lot of feedback from players on what we've presented recently, and so we're still open to feedback, and we're still looking at how it's going to work. But yes, there is a favor cost associated currently with interacting with any part of the faction system. So you can like when you go to buy something from the auction house or from the bazaar, sorry, it's very similar to an auction house system. But when you go to buy something, it'll say like, this is the gold cost, and this is how much gold you have to give to the other person, and this is the favor cost, and the favor cost goes to the bazaar. It's sort of like it's like the tax on it is like it's like your fee of entry to get past the door to buy that thing.
Okay, so this must be a designed philosophy around what we don't want is for people just to become merchant warriors, where all they do is become the strongest person and the richest person in the game by just saving, manipulating trade the whole time. Instead, it's like, it's a game. You're supposed to play the game, kill stuff, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of it for sure. It's also the primary balancing metric we have between the two factions. So because both factions require favor to interact with them, so like if you want to go buy a prophecy, it costs favor in COF. And so what we can do, because both factions have the same core cost to interact with the faction itself, and you gain it at the same rate for each faction, we can really easily balance them against each other by just changing the favor costs of each one of them. So we can say like, like we get to the end of cycle 1 or cycle 2 starting, and we're like, 98% of people were one of the factions. Like, maybe we should make that more expensive and the other one cheaper a little bit, just like make it balance it out that way a little bit, so having that favor cost as a consistent resource that's required between the two, it lets us balance them against each other.
That's fair. You mentioned something about like doing faction quests, and I didn't see much information or in depth about that. Is that something you can touch upon or elaborate on?
I more meant just like quests in the game that are there already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's just like just part of playing the game. Like as you're just doing stuff that's already in the game, you'll get favor. Sorry.
Okay. That makes sense. I like the idea of it. I mean, it's gonna be fun to see how many people are going into the whole trade versus non-trade, and with the resonances that you can gift the items and whatnot. I think it's phenomenal. I like the approach of it because it doesn't have any direct punishing features towards the players depending on the choose from. It's more like I like to play the game this way, and that's perfectly fine. And then with the idea of balancing that, I'm very excited for it. I really am. On the other hand, when it comes to that approach, the game is already set in a way where you are expected to be able to somewhat realistically target farm items in general. So how is that going to be when it comes to the idea of trading versus finding these items? We could take an example of the Reign of Dragons endgame boss with the Twisted Heart, for example, being very popular in the current state of the game. That is something a lot of people want to farm, but it's a rare drop, right? And now that we have the option of trading it, how do you feel about the balance with the idea of target farming when it comes to items such as those things that are rare? And what's the idea of balancing these things?
Yeah, that's a huge topic, and it's very tricky. You're right; it's very tricky to balance those against each other for sure. We want players to feel like they can, I guess, influence their drops, especially as merchants guilds. Still, be able to say like they can feel like they're working towards a goal, and they can say, "Hey, I'm going to spend, I'm going to do this content until I get this thing I'm looking for." We really like that, and we really want the, I guess, Circle of Fortune more is just enhancing those features that are there already. We're just bringing a little bit more oomph to that targetness of it. New word. And you can. So we want Merchants Guild to be able to just be better at target farming, really, because we still do want players to be able to target farm to an extent, as we already have in the game right now. We're not looking to really drop that ability off a cliff or something like that for Merchants Guild players. We still want them to be able to reasonably, I guess, influence what they're getting and look for specific things and be able to do that a little bit better than just everything's random.
So I had a question about, you mentioned the Resonators, and I thought this was one of the more interesting, Resonators is the name. Am I getting that correctly here? Resonance, I believe, is sort of what's referred to.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to pluralize, but yes, it's resonances.
Resonance size. All right. So one of the things I noticed about that is immediately it made me think of sort of the dynamic me and GHAZZY have, where it's just he plays more than I do. I'm more of casuality, he's more of the hardcore racer type. So I thought, okay, this is a cool mechanic. This seems like it's intended to be developed that the two different types of players can play together and still impact each other's performance. Let's say I got a girlfriend, she plays the game an hour a week, but I'm playing 10 hours a day. We're obviously going to want to still interact and play the game that we love together. That's sort of the design. So my question about this is I know it's supposed to allow you to trade items, etc. Is there any balance mechanic around this to make it where an item that is, let's say, dropping for me, even though I'm playing a tenth of what the other person has, can still somewhat be useful to the person that's blasting? Or can we expect that the person who has resonance with another person, the one who's behind, is always kind of getting useless equipment for the person who's probably not going to need it?
Yeah, if there's a big imbalance in the playtime, it is going to be a bit of a one-way street. And that's sort of it's an unfortunate side effect of the system, but it's kind of not something that we have a big intent to change much on. And I think a lot of it comes down to is just if you're playing a lot more, you're just gonna have so many better things.
Hard to balance around, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The main goal of that system is really to give you just a little bit of extra freedom it's to stop the feels bad moment of, oh, we've been playing together a bunch, and the moment we stop playing together and I go play on my own, I find that perfect thing for you. Or even just like, oh, I went and did one echo on my own and the perfect thing happened to drop even though we're still online together. It's just to fill those like little gaps.
It's for like time zone different. Like me and GHAZZY are in very different time zones. For instance, I'm from Alaska, so we obviously are going to be playing at different times, and that's to help mediate that gap more so than play time gap.
Yeah.
Okay. That answers my question on that. Thanks for going a little bit more into detail on that.
For sure.
Speaking of bad things, we had a quick conversation about that earlier, and it's been something that's been asked in my chat quite a lot. So I just hope you could give some elaboration as to why the answer is the way it is on the question. Besides the the possibility of respeccing masteries. Right now, for those of you who are unaware, when you choose character, you can choose a different type of masteries. But after you've locked in your mastery in that character, you are currently unable to change that. So is this something that you are going to be able to respec? Yes or no, and why?
Right now, for one, so all I'm going to talk about for this answer is for 1.0. Right now, it's no. You will not be able to respec your mastery. That is locked in. Once you pick your mastery, that's done. When you do it, there's a big warning box that shows up in big red letters, like this is permanent. You're not changing it. Sorry. And there's a bit of I guess I don't know, a fear of like messing up your character that goes into that with some people. And there's 2 points that 2 angles that people come at wanting to change this. It's that like, what if I mess up my character? That sort of fear. And we really try really hard to make sure that every mastery can have fun and tackle endgame and really get stuff done and do what you need to do. And maybe the people that want to push like really, really hard into the super end game where only the absolute top tier builds will even be possible to compete with, they're not going to have any problem making a second character and just rolling another mastery like that. That process is short enough that we think it's not going to really have a huge impact on those players because they're able to get another character up and running pretty quickly, really. Especially if you're playing online and you have friends that can help you get through that even faster. Like it's a short enough time period that we're not really concerned about those players that much for it. We do know that people really like having that freedom to be able to switch things up, but we also really want to convey that sense of ownership and connection to your character a little bit. It's that feeling that like, oh, this is my fire mage, this is fire sork. And you actually have that connection to this is my fire sork, and it's not just this is my mage that I switch around between all the different masteries. And we think there's a little bit more of a connection to that character if there's those. We want to have more permanent decisions if we can, but they're really tricky to work in and not feel terrible. So and that's why you can switch factions, because that is something that is that's the release valve for switching factions, is that not breaking a character completely, because we think you can make every mastery still feel fun and good. But some people may go halfway down a faction path and realize that they just can't, that whole play style is not good for them, and they're switching their whole account over generally.
That's fair. Would it be fair to say that it's more about one thing, the faction being the way you play the game, which is more catered to personal decisions, and the other one, it has more to do with your character's identity, and not wanting that to be unique to each individual character they create? Is that kind of like a good way to put it?
Yeah, I think so. There's that's a really good way to put it. It's also the like, we kind of want to avoid a meta, like a leveling and end game meta where it's like, oh, I level Sork and then I switch to Spellblade for early end game, then I switch to Ringmaster for late end game, and that whole like, that character's identity is not based in, oh, it's a Ringmaster. It's just a mage, and it loses a lot of that flavor for us.
That makes sense.
So you mentioned ease of creating a new character, which I think is something that is a decent segue to a couple of my questions here. One of which is about hardcore. So I know it's an option in the game. There's a very hardcore community, if you excuse the pun. And when it comes to the design philosophy of the game, how do you integrate hardcore into the game? Is this something that every time you create new content, you're balancing around it? Or is hardcore, you're sort of saying, well, this is an extra challenge. You yourself are asserting upon yourself, and, good luck with the game. It's balanced around the core fundamental gameplay. How do you design a brand new game from the game up while both balancing hardcore as well as, the core side of the gameplay?
Yeah, it is something that we keep in mind very frequently when we're designing enemies, players' abilities, items, all sorts of things. There's tons of little things that we do take hardcore into account for when we're designing them, for sure. Like there's times we've been talking about, for example, passives. There's some passives where we're like chance-based cheat death passives, where we're like, well, no one in hardcore is going to take that, because it's not reliable, so there's no point in having it type thing. And there's like some defense. It's a lot of times it's defensive mechanics and passives that we're talking about now. We're like, this is not for hardcore players because we know they're not going to take it, and we try and still design ways for them to build their character without needing to take those. And so yeah, like sometimes it's in the way we design boss fights. We try to make them learnable, and this is something that goes for not just hardcore as well. Because we want players that are sometimes getting through challenges and getting to a pivotal moment where if you die, you have to start all over again. We still want to be able to teach them how to interact with those mechanics. And sometimes we don't do a great job of this, and we are working on improving those still. But and new bosses, when we're designing them, there was one recently that we were talking about where like there's a mechanic you have to dodge basically, and if you fail to dodge it too many times, it's eventually going to kill you. But the first few, it's just teaching you that you got to dodge this type thing. And that's sort of that slow ramp up in teaching you how to play the boss fights. And so, yeah, we do definitely look at hardcore when we're designing mechanics in the game. I kind of went all over the place there. But
no, that's a good answer. Do you find that, just to follow up on this, and I'll pass it to GHAZZY, then I have another question sort of in the same vein here, is, do you find that hardcore as a concept from a development side either strives you to improve the game, or does it feel more of like a limiting aspect of the game where, okay, well, we're trying to build a game, but we got to make sure that it's viable for hardcore too? Do you find this to be a difficult challenge to overcome, or do you find it something that at the end of the day tends to improve your game?
I think it improves the game overall. I think that I think it's both. I think it is a challenge, and it is difficult sometimes to make work. But I think it makes the game better in the long run, which is what you want, right? Like, just because it's easy doesn't make it good.
Off to GHAZZY.
Speaking of easy, yeah, like kind of in the vein of hardcore versus softcore. something I was curious about was the punishment for dying. It's one thing to learn, but in hardcore, well, your character's going to be dead, and that's going to be hard to rectify after it's happened. But in softcore, so far, the only punishment you get for dying is the loss of stability and the possibility of whatever reward you had in that map echo you were doing. Are there plans to adjust this? Because the idea of not losing experience whatsoever from dying feels like you can just beat your head into a wall and you'll eventually reach level 100, or is this something you actually look at as a beneficial aspect of the game?
Yeah, we're not a big fan of the negative progression that comes with losing experience when you do die. I don't know, like there's certain parts of it that I personally, when I'm playing, I really like the tension that having stronger death penalties provide, which is why I've gravitated to hardcore in some games in the past. But it really does, I think, need to be an opt-in type of thing to have on the line. Like you're sort of like going out into the world and you're like, I'm betting I'm not going to die because I'm good enough and I'm fine with the outcomes, and I know there's could be negative consequences here, but like I'm ready to take on that challenge. And I think having that opt-in nature of that penalty is really good, which is that opt-in nature of hardcore. I don't think we're really interested in having that type of opt-in, like put your money on the table type situation with experience, because it splits things. It splits things again. Maybe if there was some sort of, I don't know, benefit out of it, but it's one of those things that we're more interested in having more of a loss of opportunity in the penalties. So you're not making negative progression, you're just not making positive progression. And this happens in dungeons too. Like you, maybe not a great example because we need a better way to tutorialize the dungeon bosses and the dungeon mechanics still, but the you do lose your dungeon key. So you are like you're paying an entry fee, and then if you fail, you lose that entry fee. So it's forfeit.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I think that this approach is very, very attractive. I don't want to speak for everyone, obviously, but I firmly, personally believe that this is something that a lot of people will appreciate, to have that positive progression for their time invested, especially if you only play a couple hours a week. That time invested, even if you just ended up dying a lot, you still made progression during that time you played. So you didn't end up with the day you started, ending the day where you started, because that feels kind of bad for those type of players as well. So I like the idea of it. Another thing to think about it when it comes to the content of changes that we're looking at. We have cycles or seasons. First off, what's the word you guys are going to use for this? Because we have seasons, we have leagues, and we have
cycles.
So it's going to be cycles. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little different. Sorry, you got to learn another term.
Just another one to learn there. So I guess my question there.
It's ladders as well.
Oh, right. Ladders from D2.
Yeah.
Wait, don't they have that in D3, or do we just completely ignore that?
They're called seasons in D3, right?
Okay. So I guess the question comes down to what the plan is when it comes to the I was about to say the word girth, but let's not go into those type of out of context comments. But how much content are we looking at when it comes to your plans in terms of length and the the girth, I guess.
Length and girth. Nice question there. I like that.
Yeah, so I mean, like if you really want to measure how much content you're going to be getting out of a cycle, I think it's going to depend how deep you want to dive into it. And we do really want players to have fun stuff to do and explore for the entire time between cycles, if they want, and be able to get a bulk of the experience out from like the first couple months of it. You know, depending on how hard you're playing. Some people who are like going 8 hours a day and are doing a ton of content every day are going to get through it a lot faster than people that are doing like a couple hours every other day type thing, and like it is just a time investment of like how hard you're going to play is how long it's going to take really. But we do want players to feel like there's I guess different different benchmarks. Breakpoints might be a better word for it, where you can be like, okay, I'm really going to invest in like completing this angle, the primary feature of the cycle or something like that. I'm going to dig in real deep, and maybe there's like some extra stuff you can go for if you want, but you know, like, oh, I don't have an extra 10 hours to go for that, so I'll pass on that for this cycle or something like that. Maybe just can't quite finish it in time. And I think we also have to be mindful that a huge percentage of our audience is also interested in playing, you know, other games that are offering similar cyclical content, with PoE and D4 and D3 and D2R and, you know, Torchlight and Grim Dawn. Like there's a ton of other games out there that are pulling attention at the same sort of like new content getting dropped really frequently. So we kind of have to be aware that not everyone's going to stick around for the whole cycle every single time, and give them an opportunity to have fun and really engage with the content, but still have enough to sink their teeth into if they don't want to go to those other games as well. And it's a very difficult balancing act to walk. And our very first cycle is really focused on getting our core game out and just having those core features solid and fun and all that sort of stuff. And we're gonna look at getting into these more I guess like PoE standard cycle or like PoE League type style mechanics a little bit in the future here.
Okay. Like, are we talking 3 months, 4 months, half a year cycles, or what are we looking at on the terms of length there?
Yeah, I can't give you like a specific number here, but I can say it'll feel similar to what you're expecting from other games as well, and it'll fit nicely into that cadence.
So I have a couple questions to change the topic a little bit around balance of different in-game mechanics. So one controversial, let's call it, topic that I've seen brought up in almost any game is one-shot mechanics. So I was hoping you could dive a little bit into the team's philosophy when it comes to one-shot mechanics and their places within ARPGs, and yours specifically.
Yeah. I think that they are good in small doses when you can be taught about them effectively beforehand and are easily able to see them coming and like have an opportunity to react to them. So one-shot mechanics are it's a skill test is really what it is. It's a your character is not strong enough to handle this, so you as a player have to do something to stop your character from dying. So it's a player skill test instead of a character gear check, which is like an enrage mechanic on a boss is a character gear check where like you gotta kill it fast enough, and like doesn't matter how good a player you are, if your character can't do enough damage, you're not gonna get through it. So this is kind of the opposite of that. And we do have a few one-shot mechanics in boss. Like Julra is the end of our first dungeon, and she will kill you if you stand in her like big giant attack. You're done. And part of the reason we have that in that specific dungeon is the whole dungeon leading up to that. We've given you a special ability, and we've said, and the whole dungeon, in order to get through it, you have to use this special ability multiple times. So we're like hammering into you. This is what you need for this fight, and it's kind of when we were designing dungeons and specifically this mechanic, it's kind of reminiscent of like a Zelda dungeon in a way, where you walk into the dungeon, you get the item from the dungeon, you have to use that item in the dungeon to kill the boss of the dungeon, and you're out. And it's sort of that same type of learning mechanic that we try to implement there, where you're using the thing you get there to conquer it, and it is a skill check, and it is something that we do like having these types of one-shot mechanics in the game if they're presented properly. And I think the bad one-shot mechanics that we do end up seeing in Last Epoch, which is it's a little frustrating to have, but they do show up sometimes, is when you get to super high, and this is sort of a byproduct of having any infinite scaling system. When you get too high in corruption in our endgame system, that there's no real end to it, there's no cap, you can keep scaling corruption as high as you want, and that difficulty keeps ramping up over and over and over, and then abilities that were once just strong abilities become one-shot abilities because you've cranked up the damage and difficulty so high. And because those were not designed as one-shot mechanics in the first place, they don't have a proper anticipation for it, and it just becomes, well, that's the wall your character hit. So these one-shot mechanics can show up in multiple places, and the ones that we've designed them to show up in, we do try and tutorialize them as best we can beforehand. And the ones that they kind of organically show up in, I don't know how to fix that yet.
It kind of sounds like one-shot mechanics are a skill check for both the player from having to get good and the devs for having to create fair ones. Is it fair to say it's kind of a skill check on both sides?
Yeah, I'll go with that one for sure.
Okay. So sorry to hit you with back-to-back kind of harder questions to answer here around balance mechanics, but another one that I was wondering about was balancing solo v multiplayer can be difficult. I've seen sometimes, there will be games in which multiple player groups are always going to be more efficient. You have multiple players. But then the solo player feels like he's forced into a situation of having to play in a group in order to keep up. But then on the other side of it, if you are someone who wants to play in a group, but you have to balance around that, and groups are fundamentally, let's say, at the disadvantage, then you feel like now I'm ostracized from playing with my friends because I want to progress at a rate that is competitive. How are you guys approaching the conversation of how do we both make it where people can choose to play in a group, play solo, drop in and out even, while still maintaining a fair gameplay environment?
I mean, it's easy. Just make it perfectly balanced, and so everyone. No. I think the one liner we try and strive for, anyways, is a well-oiled machine group that is organized and planned ahead will be better than an individual player playing on their own, who will be better than a haphazard group that's just thrown together and said, "Let's go have fun." And so there's this like, if you're taking that extra step to like design a group to play together and have those like strengths working together and those weaknesses compensated by each other, you're gonna have a stronger party, and you're gonna have better, faster progression, all that sort of stuff. And because working together is not easy sometimes, like that's, and so you're rewarded for working together and coming up with those strategies together. In that you're going to get things done probably a little bit faster. I mean, we want those margins to be pretty small. We don't want them to be a big difference. We want it to be like, hey, like because you did a good job at working together, you're rewarded a little bit. And we do have party size difficulty scaling as just like a straight, like this is how much harder it is, and those numbers can be adjusted very easily. And sometimes small adjustments can have a big meta effect. Like you don't need to make a huge change to have the conversation shift sometimes.
Fair. On the topic of party playing and efficiency, something that I've been very curious about personally as well is the whole idea of plans for the future when it comes to races, tournaments, community challenges, or events, and how that would reflect into the focus of party players versus solo players. So what's the future and the plans from now moving forward with these things?
Yeah, I think we would. I can't speak specifically to every single thing we're going to do in the future, because I think a lot of that's going to come down to experimentation. And like we'll probably try to run events where it's like, hey, this is specifically a party event, or this is an open event, or this is specifically a solo event. And we'll experiment with different types and see, because a lot of that's going to come back to community feedback of what feels good, what players enjoy. And I know we already separate ladder progression based on party size in order to try and compensate for that a little bit. So I think they'll likely just be different categories initially for different party sizes. It's probably what we'll try and do. And it's hard to because people jump in and out of parties, it's hard to split them too hard that way. But there's benchmarks and things that happen where you can be like, okay, at this point, if you're in a party or not.
All right.
Did you have a follow-up, GHAZZY, or you want me to hit? I got another hard, philosophy balance question to fill the void here.
I could throw in there, since we talked about party play, I think we could talk a little bit quickly about visual clarity. This has been a let's call it a rather hot topic in certain areas in the genre. How is visual clarity going to be maintained? Because it is very good from my perspective in the game right now. But once you start getting, these flashy big build effects going on, and you suddenly have a full party play going on, what's the plan when it comes to visual clarity to maintain being able to actually see what's going on?
Yeah, and it's a great point, because you start getting into things. We don't have any skill MTX yet, but you start getting things where it's like, oh, you can buy skill MTX, and suddenly your fireball is got like a rainbow fireball, and it's it's so much more, or something like that. Like it's there's a lot of room for that visual clarity to very easily get out of hand very quickly. And it is something we're careful of, much to the sometimes VFX designers' dismay of where we're like, reel that back, it's too big, too big. But yeah, it's one of those things where we do pay very close attention to it. And there may I can very well see there come a time where we have to make a systematic change in order to like add some new feature to the game in order to be able to have a big boost to visual clarity. I'm being kind of vague about this because we don't have anything designed or set up yet to do this. But there may come a time where we need to focus on that, and we're definitely prepared to make that investment in improving visual clarity if it comes to it.
Sounds fair.
So I have a question related to another sort of game balance philosophy type of question. So how does the team approach the concept of melee versus ranged? And we can go all the way back to MMOs. This is a fundamental question in game design. Melee is at a disadvantage because the ranged guy can hit you from far away. So how are you guys approaching that in an ARPG in order to give melee a fighting chance?
Yeah. Usually we try to give, and I know as soon as I say this, people will be like, well, that's not the way it is. I'm like, yeah, and it's not perfect. This is what we try and do. We usually try to give melee classes more defensive options. And sometimes those are just passives or skills that reflect that ability. An example of that being like we give abilities like Rebuke to Sentinel, which is generally mostly a melee class, has ranged options, but is primarily melee. And it's an ability that you can just tank almost everything in the game with it. And we try and give those more defensive options to classes that are generally in melee situations. Sometimes we'll give defensive options to melee offensive abilities, like Vengeance on Sentinel again, which gives you ways to sort of offset that difference of not having to, like being in melee range. And then the other half of this is or we'll give them higher mobility options. So Rogue is like a Blade Dancer anyways, is primarily a melee class, and we try and give them lots of mobility options so that they are able to reposition themselves in combat really efficiently, and not lose too much damage as they're doing it. Sometimes those are just like little hops while they're still attacking. Sometimes those are just low cooldown movement abilities, things like that. We also do look at boss design as well, because that's where it really stands out. I think for the most part is boss design, or boss encounters. Sorry, and we have the ability in our AI system to say, okay, like this is here's a list of abilities that the boss can do, and this ability they can't target within a certain range. So it's like they'll only use this ability if someone's at range, or they'll only use this ability if someone's at melee. And so we can actually change which abilities they're using based on how far you are from the boss. And so sometimes we'll maybe give the same ability, but it goes off a little faster if you're at range. So you'll actually have to dodge a little bit more actively if you're farther away or something like that. Just to sort of offset that a little bit.
Fair.
Then go on, GHAZZY.
Now you go ahead. I forgot a drink, so I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Yeah, you go get your water. So another common talking point, and I know there is a difference between games when it comes to this design philosophy, is when it comes to mid-cycle balance changes. So let's say you guys start the cycle, there's one front runner that's obviously very strong. Now, one such interpretation is, well, this is a power fantasy, people are loving this build, everyone's using it, let's not touch it, let's let them have it for the season. But then the other side of things, you might say, this build is ruining the season, this one is so overpowered, you feel inclined to have to build it. So how do you approach that, and can we expect mid-balance, mid-patch balance changes, basically? Is this something we can expect going forward?
Yes. Short answer, yes. You can expect mid-cycle balance changes. I would not. So this is a very deep topic as well. Something that we actually discuss pretty frequently.
Sorry, I know I'm throwing some sort of the deeper ones in there, but I'm trying to pull the hard topics out here.
Yeah, no, I really like these topics, and I'm having a hard time not just rambling on them.
Go. That's why we're here, baby. Ramble.
Yeah.
Go.
But so the mid-season balance changes in general. This whole thing is a bit of a hornet's nest, because if you make a mistake, it can be disastrous, which is something that we are so we do take care when we are making balance changes, especially mid-season stuff. It hasn't been a big deal for us in the past because we're not in this huge audience yet, and there's not this huge level of competitiveness yet. But we do know that it's coming, and we do know that we need to be tactful with how we handle this. If there's, I guess the general philosophy of these sorts of things is, if there's a build that is like really running away with the game, like really just it's this or nothing, have fun, type thing, then we'll probably be pretty inclined to step in and do something. And it's probably just be to give other builds a fighting chance. And we really don't want to, if there is a build that is a top tier build, we want to be really careful to make sure it stays a top tier build, especially mid cycle. And that's really important. So that people, because one of the worst things I think we can do is have a bunch of people make this character, have it be crushing, and then us be like, all right, patch day, here we go. You can't do anything anymore. Sucks to be you. Like that would just feel terrible. And so we really want to avoid that. Now the obvious answer here, and I'll go down a bit of a chain of like stuff here. The obvious answer is, okay, we'll just don't nerf it and just buff other things to match it. Great. Now we've got other things that are at the same level. Awesome. They've been buffed. Wonderful. And then we get to the end of the cycle and we go, okay, but now we've got a bunch of builds that are just way too powerful, and we have to nerf them all back. And suddenly it becomes this cycle of mid-season we buff everything, and mid-cycle we buff everything, and in between cycles we nerf everything. And that doesn't feel good either. So we have to kind of take an approach, like a hybrid approach of both things at every sort of juncture, where we are, maybe we're doing a small nerf to that build that's really far out in front, and some small buffs to some builds that are close by, and just kind of bring them closer together a little bit to make things more competitive mid-cycle, because we don't want people to feel like their build's been targeted and they've been targeted as a player type thing. And it's a difficult line to walk, and we've been doing our best. And like there's been builds we've had that have gone a little out of control in the past. And I think we've done a pretty good job at doing mid-cycle balancing on them already. Like there was a Werebear Baldur's Wrath build where it's this mace that whenever you use a movement ability, it uses Earthquake. And Werebear had a really, really fast spammable movement ability that would just trigger Earthquake over and over and over again. And we've nerfed that build like 6 times now, and it's still great. It's not what it used to be type thing, but like we did it slowly in increments, and I think that whole process went over pretty well. The really hard thing is nerfing it to a point where it's still fun, it's still powerful, it's still competitive, it's still strong, but not over the top, and have players still feel that it's those ways. Like, and that's a unique case for every single one of them.
Okay, that's pretty detailed answer.
Like on the topic of like balance things, I remember a developer for another company, he used his hands to signal balancing very effectively. And he said he wanted to have builds in between 2 brackets. They didn't want builds to be above the line of too overpowered, and they wanted to bring builds that were below the line to not be subpar in performance, and want to have this little meta segment of builds in this spectrum. They will work and they function. So using the hand symbols here, the statistics or a diagram, like whatever you want to call it, exactly. Like some companies or some games, they don't mind having builds that are completely disasters below that line, and then have like, well, this season you're going to have these builds to choose from that's going to be performing. What's the philosophy moving forward for Last Epoch, like when it comes to that? To put fewer words to my question is, are all builds supposed to be able to be in this spectrum, or are you going to be fine with having builds that are going to be subpar in performance?
I think the goal is to have all fantasies in that bracket, in that spectrum of like I can play and I can have fun. If there was if we were in a situation where there was no archer, like ranged archer, like physical ranged archer type class fantasy that was possible to play. I've picked a bad one because there's only one master that can do that. But um there was no physical archer class or a build that was even possible to do all the end game content. That would be a really big problem. But if we have like say there's like a flurry build and a puncture build and a multi-shot build, they're all physical ranged archer type class builds, and maybe only one of them is like really able to compete, and the other two are kind of ho hum right now. They've fallen off. That wouldn't be. I don't think that we would probably take too much immediate action mid cycle to buff those builds too heavily. I don't think we'd be like, oh my god, we have to buff these builds because they've fallen out, because there's still that that general class fantasy, that same character fantasy that's available in a slightly different build, and having those adjacent builds that are still achieving that similar fantasy, I think fills that gap pretty well. So yeah, we definitely want to have as many builds as possible in that viable range. Viable is such a hard word to have. Yeah, and having as many builds in that range as possible is definitely the goal. But if bringing a build up into that, I think we'd be less concerned about bringing builds up into that bracket if there were other similar adjacent builds in that bracket already.
I like it. Sounds like a good answer to me, at least.
Sweet.
So one question comes to mind about the psychos. I'm not sure if we've gone too much in depth into psychos in other interviews or releases. I wasn't able to see too much on. So one question I have related to the psychos is I see different philosophies from game design teams when it comes to like league psycho seasons, whatever you're going to see it. Some of them seems to be like, well, the psycho seasons, they're here to give us a chance to do something more wacky, something that we normally wouldn't introduce to the core game that maybe fundamentally changes everything about the game. But then I've also seen the concept of, well, the psychos or seasons or what have you, these are allowing us to implement basically patch content updates where it adds on to the already existing game and doesn't really fundamentally change too much about the original. It just gives us more expanded upon the original, for instance. So what is your guys' plans with psychos when it comes to this concept? Or are these more, way out there type of concepts that, maybe not influence the rest of the game's development just for the psycho? Or are you more planning these to be, further development and continuation of the game?
I think it's something that's going to evolve over time. It's something that we're planning for it to evolve over time. And so initially, it's going to be much more based in like building on what we have and polishing what we have and focusing on like that core gameplay experience. And so that's why like the first cycle is these item factions, and it's a kind of a core function of the whole game, and it's not a separate end game system that you're going to interact with. It's not like a new dungeon system. It's not a new monolith system. It's not a new system that would go alongside Dungeons, Monolith, and something else. So there's not this like third end game system, I guess, arena. So fourth end game system that's going to come in with that cycle initially. So those first few cycles are going to be things like we're building these item factions in that affects the whole game, and those first few cycles are gonna feel very similar in that sense, where there's mechanics that like build on the monolith, build on the dungeons, maybe add a new dungeon, something like that. Like, so there's going to be that initially they're going to fit much more in that latter category that you were talking about. And then once we've kind of got that really core experience, like tuned in, feeling great, and like deep enough that people can really sink their teeth into that core experience and don't need any of these extra things to really have fun for a significant amount of time, we'll start adding in those more, I guess, PoE style extra endgame mechanics that go with a cycle. So we'll start adding in, maybe there is that fourth or fifth or sixth new endgame system that will show up in one of these. And so there'll be, it'll start off slower, and it'll get a little bit more bigger stuff once we're not touching on core stuff as much.
Fair enough. And something I think that Last Epoch is doing phenomenally well is the crafting process. Something I want to touch upon there is the approach to avoid overly complex crafting that we find in other ARPGs, or overly non-complex, overly simplistic crafting processes in other ARPGs. Like, what's the philosophy here moving forward? Because you made a rather big craft change not too long ago when it comes to the system, which I was very surprised to see, because I love the previous one, and somehow you managed to make it better. That's my personal opinion on it. But moving forward, what's the take when it comes to crafting to keep it in this effective way, or maybe not?
We're really, really happy with where crafting is right now overall. Like that, the general style and that shift we made was really positive. We were not expecting to make that shift at all. But the amount of feedback we were getting from our players, the amount of feels bad moments that were happening made it necessary for us to take another look at it. And while it was a really positive experience for some people, it was a really negative experience for a lot of other people. And so we wanted to try and make it a more positive experience for more people. And that seemed to go really well. So that was great. But so we are really happy with where it's sitting right now. I think the place that our crafting system will evolve to, because it will evolve definitely. It'll evolve through new crafting items, so like new runes, new glyphs, things like that. There probably won't be some huge dump of like, oh, here's 10 new runes or something like that. It'll probably be more like, all right, the cycle, here's 1 new rune, or here's 2 new glyphs. And they'll be pretty small, like little incremental changes. And then we'll look at other ways to have supplementary crafting. So there's you can kind of look at the reward system for the Temporal Sanctum dungeon. When you kill Jewel, you get to do your legendary craft. And that's sort of a supplemental crafting system. And I think we'll see we'll probably, I think we're likely to see more dungeons that have similar style supplementary one-shot crafting systems that come up, things like that. So I think that style is working for us really well. And adding in new, or like sometimes just adding in a single new like rune or glyph can have a pretty big impact for really enfranchised players, as far as new opportunities that it opens up and new avenues that people who are like really in with the crafting, they know how to do it. Adding in just one little rune can actually have a pretty big impact for those players, but not have a super big impact for the approachability for new players, which I think is really important.
Fair.
Unless you have a follow-up, GHAZZY, I was going to start picking through some of what I see as the most common questions I've seen. And some of these you may have answered. They may be in a frequently asked question, et cetera, everywhere. But since we're sort of doing a full interview and everything here, I think we'll just kind of rapid fire through a few of these in order to get these questions out of the way. The most common question I'm seeing here is the game planning to come to console and crossplay? This is probably the most common question I've received.
So I don't have any info about any sort of crossplay stuff. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if there's any restrictions that we just don't know about.
Sure.
So I'm just gonna go big. I don't know on that one.
Fair enough.
We do really want to expand the platforms that the game is on. We haven't fully nailed down what platforms that's going to be yet.
Sure.
I think the obvious big targets for audience size is Xbox and PlayStation. I'm not sure Switch is going to be even capable of running the game, because it's a little on the heavy side right now still. So I don't know if that's even possible yet. We haven't even started talking to these companies. We haven't talked to Sony. We haven't talked to Microsoft. We don't have dev kits. We don't have any of these things. So none of that process has even begun. We haven't even decided which ones we're even going to try to do yet. We do know that we want to go to new platforms. We don't know which ones they're going to be yet. Another, like, I can probably guess what the next question here is about Steam Deck.
You're reading my mind here, Mike. And I just want to say, by the way, I appreciate you tackling like all of the questions with just like blatant, straightforward, don't know. Like, you haven't started talking to them. Like, it's nice to have that blatant level of transparency. But yeah, you are correct. Steam Deck, Asus ROG Ally, handhelds, the game's on Steam. People, it's an ARPG. They're going to want to play with controller, blast it in the mobile, in the car, whatever. How are you guys approaching optimization there?
Yeah. So optimization is like, so our number one priority is server performance, server quality optimization on multiplayer, making that fun, that experience just awesome. Number two, just performance and optimization in general of the game, making that run as smooth as possible. And those are very connected things. And so Steam Deck, we consider Steam Deck to be an unsupported platform right now as well. However, we do have Linux and controller support, which are kind of the two things you need to make Steam Deck work. And we do have improvements to both Linux and controller support coming in 1.0 that will incidentally make Steam Deck better. And there are people who have got it working on Steam Deck already, which is fantastic. We don't make builds for it. We don't test for it. We have no idea the problem Steam Deck has right now. It's another one of the platforms that's going to be in the conversation for, hey, which platforms do we expand into? It does have that leg up of a pretty low barrier to entry. So I don't want to say I don't want to say like, oh yes, it's going to happen or anything like that. But Steam Deck does have a lot going for it in that debate for sure.
Speaking of a lot of players existing on different platforms, or the desire to have handheld gameplay, there are a surprising amount of people, from my own perspective, that we've seen in other ARPGs having the desire to not play cycles, leagues, seasons, ladders. So we're talking about the sandbox area of the Eternal Realm Standard League, or what are we calling it in Last Epoch? We can ask that first, and then
Legacy.
What's the plan going forward?
Yeah, we're calling it Legacy.
Legacy. Yep.
Yeah. So once you finish, I guess all the characters that exist currently on live, if you're playing online right now, effectively those are all Legacy characters already. When you boot up at 1.0, there's gonna be a pop-up that says, "Hey, your character's been moved to Legacy." They're effectively already in Legacy. Is how you can think of it. Yeah, we do see a ton of people who are, especially when they find out that like item factions are coming to Legacy characters with 1.0, that are quite happy about that. And there's this balancing act of bringing new content to Legacy immediately at the same time as cycles, and then like, is there enough interest in playing a cycle if there's no new content for it? And so that's a big give and take there for sure. And then for us as well, it's monitoring or maintaining is a better word, and developing for two different gameplay environments is something that we have to be conscious of, right? Like, so once we start having new content that does eventually long term that does eventually start coming to cycle only, maybe that's a possibility. We don't know exactly how that's going to shake out yet. It's going to come down to a lot of player feedback. It's going to come down to just seeing how people are engaging with our content. If we're if no one, like, if people, like, it's hard to predict how it's going to happen. And we'll see what the players want, what they're engaging with, what they're enjoying. We do take into account how Legacy players are interacting with these systems, and the fact that there is no reset. So like, when we're looking at how the Merchant's Guild, the Bazaar, is going to shake out, the start of 1.0 for the Bazaar is going to be so different on Legacy compared to Cycle, because everyone who's playing Legacy has this huge stable of items. Like the Merchant's Guild in Legacy, the Bazaar is going to be full of amazing items right off the bat. And with Cycle, it's going to start completely empty. So I think that's going to be really interesting to watch and see how that shakes out. And how those two Bazaar inventories play out is going to give us a lot of really good information on how we want to handle 1.1. And we are very mindful that a lot of people don't like cycle content, and we are very mindful that a lot of people do like cycle content. And balancing those two desires is very difficult. But I don't think it's impossible to have a fun environment for both.
I have a question. Speaking of both styles of gameplay here, I have a question about offline mode that was brought up in the chat that I think is a pretty good question, which is, you guys have a full, complete offline mode. Just Correct. Yes. So in the offline mode variant, are there things that we can expect that will not be in the offline mode as compared to the online mode? Obviously, trading would be the obvious one that comes to mind. But outside of that, what can we expect in terms of differences?
So I think the offline mode going forward, like long term, the offline mode will look very similar to Legacy. I think those will kind of go hand in hand, and we'll treat them very similarly.
Okay.
And just to be clear, just so everyone knows, the way we're handling the getting to offline mode is it's actually a launch option from Steam where you can just be like start in offline mode, and
cool.
it doesn't require an internet connection at all. You can boot the game. You don't have to log in. It just goes offline. It doesn't matter if you are on a boat in the middle of the ocean or a plane in the middle of the sky. You're fine. It'll run. As far as stuff that won't be in on stuff that will be in online but won't be in offline, you're looking at Merchants Guild, because you can't trade with people that aren't connected to you, and currently MTX is the other thing. So no cosmetics will appear in offline mode at 1.0, which I know a whole bunch of people just went, oh, and we know that it's either a really popular or really unpopular decision, and we're still working out the best way to handle all these things, and we are very interested in your feedback. So if you care one way or the other, we are interested to hear from you. We're always accepting feedback on our everywheres.
So another question that I see, and we're kind of going through rapid fire through some of the most common ones here. And by the way, for people watching this on the live stream side of things, feel free to put your questions in chat. We are picking through them. They're going to a list here. 11th Hour Games is in the chat grabbing your questions for us. But one of the things I was wondering myself, as well as I shout out to Legendary Drops, I see he's in the chat and he mentions the same things, is that you have D4, which is sort of on the what people would consider easy to understand side of things. You have Path of Exile, which is on the fairly complex side of things. Okay, and they have their demographics of each type of player for this reason. Whereas Last Epoch seems uniquely slated sort of in the middle, where it has complexity to it, but I've only played through the campaign, just got to Monolith sort of the end game, and it all seemed fairly easy, readable to understand. Maybe you got to do a little bit of knowing how to get the skills going, but for the most part, it seems pretty self-explanatory. So is this purposefully crafted to have the balance of ease of use as well as complexity, and are you guys going to continue to take that design principle and push it going forward?
Short answer, yes. Like, just you very, very well encapsulated what we're looking at here. We are really interested in having a, like, I mean, the one-liner is easy to learn, hard to master, and we want that, and a big part of, I guess, how our skills are designed really is that whole skill system is to service that. Things are compartmentalized, so you have these roughly 30 node trees for each skill, and those are, and you're looking at 5 of them at a time for a build. So like it's a lot there total, but it is in chunks, and so it's you're able to digest it a little bit easier in these chunks and things like that. And we do try to have the intuitive builds be pretty good. So when we're looking at balancing things, if there is an intuitive build that is really underperforming, we do tend to buff those faster than an oddball build. So if someone's like, I really want to play a firecaster, but I want it to be a rogue, and we're like, well, like, I mean, well, we might throw you some tools in there to try and make it work, but we're not gonna hold your hand on that one. But if someone's like, oh, I really want to make a sword and board tank character, just like a very typical sword and board character, we're gonna make that fantasy easy to dive into and have the intuitive options really actually do well. But then have room for maybe more advanced mechanics in the game to give you access to things to push that build into the next level.
That's fair. When it comes to the legacy area, I'm not sure if you gave an answer to that. If you did, I missed it. It was when it comes to the cycle content, is that expected to exist in the Legacy League at the same time as it's running parallelly, like in parallel with the actual cycle content, or not at all, or it lagged behind desynced? or what's the plan there?
So initially, yes, it is designed to show up at the same time. So 1.0, everything's launching at the same time. Everyone gets everything at the same time. Um, we're planning on doing that as well for at least the first couple cycles. I think we haven't we're not locked in on exactly how that's going to happen going forward. This is going to be something that's going to be influenced by player feedback as well. I think if I was gonna look into my magic 8 ball and look into the future and see what's gonna happen, I would say there's a good chance we'll see a slow transition into more content being cycle only. So like maybe like a couple cycles down the road, there's some unique items that are cycle only, and then maybe the cycle after that, there's some like unique items and maybe a new glyph or something that's cycle only, and then like it maybe starts to trickle in a little bit more that as we're, and this is sort of what I was talking about as well with how the cycles themselves are going to change as we get more and more of them in. We'll probably start to see a little bit of a shift to a little bit more stuff being cycle only. And that how that transition happens is going to be based a lot in the reaction we're seeing from our community each cycle, how that happens, how that goes. And we're really not afraid to pivot and change and modify this as we go, because we might look at this and go like, well, that was a horrible mistake, let's change it. So we'll see. This is one of those things that I think is going to be not super easy to lay out exactly what's going to happen before we get there.
So you mentioned unique items here, and something I've noticed is that unique items, legendary items in games, whatever you want to call them, there tends to be two things. They're either really strong and few and far between, or there's a million of them and only a couple of them are good. So this is another sort of balanced design philosophy style. How are you guys tackling this, and what is your design philosophy around unique items going forward as you introduce more of them?
Definitely. I think the legendary system was our big response to this problem. And I think it has done a very good job at bringing more unique items into the conversation of endgame builds. I think that's really the big thing is the pool of options you have when you're looking at an endgame build. When you're like, okay, I'm gonna design this new build. What tools do I have to work with? And having as many things that are like even just like conversation pieces in those end game builds as possible is really a useful thing for us, and I think it's a really positive thing for the game as a whole, especially for people that like to make builds or people that like to try new things each cycle, and or people that like to try 20 things, and it drives having more things in those, having more items in those, like, oh, this could be used in a build category. It drives more things to trade. It drives more things to like, hey, here's a drop that I got that's not for my build, but ooh, that could make a good druid, and oh, maybe I'm gonna go make a druid now. And so having more of those, as many of those as possible in that conversation is really really important to us. And this is a big reason why we added the legendary system to the game, was because we designed a ton of these like level 1 to 60 uniques that for the most part endgame builds were just like, okay, whatever, they don't exist. And so now, because they can get legendary potential and they can get more affixes added onto them from like super endgame affixes, they can suddenly become actually viable items. And some of them, no matter how good, how like 4 LP with like perfect stats on it, it's still crap. And there's a couple of those still. And so we're not aiming for 100% success rate on this. We're aiming for like as big of a pool as possible in those things. And I really think the legendary system shines at making this like really good, and sort of it buffers us for the future where we can add more uniques, and they're still going to have these options for adding more leveling uniques, or more early game uniques and things like that can still be late game efficient. And when we're designing new uniques as well, we do look at, if we're like, oh, this is a low level unique, like what's it going to look like as a legendary? We like, that's part of the design process now.
So
I really like that with the specificness of making legendary potential reintroduce even leveling low level uniques into something that is usable in the end game. So I remember the last build I played, it used some very, very, very nasty crafted rings. But if you got like an LP2, LP3 Quicksilver ring, which is a very low level leveling unique, which is very common, so you dropping legendary potential on those was not that uncommon to do. You would eventually find one that you could then exalted item craft into a legendary item. And suddenly I was using this, is it level 6 or something? If even that, this Quicksilver ring?
I'm not exactly sure, but it's low.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal. And I love that aspect of it because it made me feel like I drop a legendary item, or sorry, a unique item, felt exciting because I could look at it, and no matter what it was, no matter how low level it was, if it had legendary potential, my immediate thought process would be, how can I make use of this? Will this be something where the unique item modifiers can replace whichever 1, 2, maybe 3 mods that I don't get on the legendary version of it? Will they compensate the loss of those? So I can get like, the crit avoidance in from a craft, then I could use it because it will still be really good for the end game version of it. I think it's a fantastic way to avoid this plethora of items that's just going to be ignored because it's too low level, it's a trash unique, I'm not going to use it, to suddenly be in the conversation of, hey, I can utilize this. This is great.
Yeah,
no, I love
it. That's exactly right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So something you said there, Mike, struck out at me, where you said, where you get an item, you think, maybe this doesn't fit my build, but this might end up having potential to be a really good druid item for perhaps. And there's trading in the game, so if you see an item, your knowledge of knowing that this item could be a good druid item might lead you to craft it and then perhaps sell it on the marketplace. But what I'm noticing is that in other games, that knowledge of crafting itself becomes an economic weapon that you can then use to utilize purchasing things off the market that you know has potential, but other people might not recognize, craft it into an item and therefore make profit on it. But early in our conversation, you mentioned that there is this sort of favor system in which you use to purchase, be able to actually do the trading itself. So that does seem to somewhat limitize trading. So where I'm coming at this is the concept that you guys are approaching trading with, we don't want people to be able to buy items off the market, craft it, and use the knowledge to then resell and flip items? Or how are you guys approaching that side of like an economic war, really, when it comes to crafting knowledge?
So the approach that we're taking here is less of we don't want people to take certain actions. It's more of we want the Merchants Guild Bazaar to be an effective tool for players to improve their gear that they're finding, that can fill in the gaps in the gear that they're missing, where they're playing the game and they're like, oh, I really need to find this piece of gear. I can go to the bazaar and I can get it. And we really want that to be an accessible option for everyone that's playing in the Merchants Guild. And we want that to be an effective tool for everyone that's playing, and to be able to gain access to that trade system, even if they're not playing the market really. And so that's the approach we're taking from it, is that we want this to be an accessible market for everyone. And the unfortunate side effect of that approach for players that really want to play the market as a mechanic where they're buying and flipping items and things like that is that we kind of have to shut that down a little bit.
Sure.
And we actually kind of shut that down a lot, because unfortunately you can't resell an item at all.
Right.
So you can't you buy that item, you craft it, you do whatever you want to it. It's not going back up on the bazaar. You're using it or you're throwing it away.
So it's basically a hard no on the knowledge crafting economy side of things.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we've kind of had to pick and choose which pieces of this we want. And this is one of the most complex systems we've ever introduced into the game, possibly the most complex system we've ever introduced in the game. And we are not afraid to change it. If something's not working, we will adjust it. If something is not landing, we will make changes to it. I know we've all week, because we've got so many eyes on this system right now. I mean, every stage really. So what says, when we first announced this last year, it was 11 months ago now, 12 months ago. We put out that first initial post about 2 weeks after the idea was even pitched. That was a very early draft of things.
Sure.
And luckily everything stayed like really similar. So little has changed, which we were very happy about. But we got so much feedback on that we've had tons of design discussions since then, and we've made changes for it. We released our first version of it to the CT program. They had feedback for us. We added a bunch of stuff. That's when we added lenses to the COF. And now that we've released the most recent post about it, and there's so many, this is the most eyes we've had on it ever. We're back in design discussions again, already talking about how we're going to improve the system. So this is not a set in stone thing entirely, and we are very interested in feedback on it, especially once people have their hands on it. That's the most valuable, because there's a lot of like theoretical feedback that we're getting, which is very valuable. But once people actually have a chance to experience it and play with it and tell us how they feel, like when I did X, I felt Y, and that's the type of feedback that's really, really, really important to us. And we're gonna be paying close attention to that, and we're gonna be looking at that. But right now, unfortunately, for people that want to play the market as a game mode, that's not going to be available right now.
It's really interesting because I'm one of those players that I like when I play trade leagues and stuff like that, and MMOs, ARPGs. I like to make my currency work for me. So flipping, crafting, and for profit and those things is kind of the things I do. Yep. And that entire play style is neglected. But what it also means is also that the market doesn't reach this inflation moment where in an early stage of a cycle, you have the lower budget items, so to say, and then you go into medium budget items. But as soon as you enter that stage, the people that are upgrading to the better items are now recycling into their secondhand market items, going in and flooding the low budget, which will significantly lower it and create this supply versus demand into a buyer's market. So you're going to have, at least theoretically, it seems it's going to have a rather stable and healthy economy because of the fact that no secondhand items or flippers are going to be actively working on it. I like the idea of it, but as a player coming from the approach of enjoying that kind of play style, it's going to be very interesting to go through it. But from my personal perspective, I actually am more interested in the COF than I am of the Merchants Guild because of how well Last Epoch has designed loot acquisition to target farming. But on the topic of party playing or interacting with other players, there was another chat question regarding guilds, which is something we've seen in pretty much all ARPGs that I can think of, or most of them have a guild function. Yet there is very little impact or benefit or even purpose behind the guild functions other than, hey, you now have access to a little tag in your name and another chat channel to chat with your friends in. What's the plans with guilds moving forward for Last Epoch?
Yeah, so you literally said, as soon as you start talking about guilds, I'm like, well, that's exactly what I'm going to say. And you said exactly what I was going to say about how the conclusion we came to of what a guild system would look like in Last Epoch. It would be a tag by your name and a private chat channel. And while there's not like there's value in that, and we do know that players want to have that, and there's good things to have there. It's not enough value to take time away from other development processes right now for us to add something like that. We do really like the idea of having a guild system, and we think that those buildings of communities inside of games is really valuable. Like I'm still friends with a couple people that I was in WoW guilds with. What was it, 12, 13 years ago or something? So we don't want to discount that at all. And I would be surprised if we never introduce a guild system to Last Epoch. I would really like to see, and I know we've discussed this internally, we really like to see some sort of mechanic to go with it, some extra thing to do, some reason to have guilds there, to make it feel just a little bit more, and at the same time not being mandatory to join that guild to play in games, something like that, because we know we don't want people to feel left out of playing the game if they don't join a guild, but we do want people to feel like there's some sort of activity to do, or maybe not activity is a bad word, but just reason to compete with other guilds, or maybe a guild ladder or something. I don't know how that would look exactly, but just something a little bit more than a tag in a chat channel. Yeah.
To bring it back to the trading side of things real quick, I wanted to ask a question, because what it sounds like the not being able to resell portion of the trading allows you to do is allow for two things, which is remove sort of price fixers. So no one's going to buy 15 of the item they're attempting to sell in order to list it as a higher one if you can't relist it, right? So on the price fixing side of things, I have one question, which is there any ability for the person who puts an item up to be able to decline the offers. Because what you'll see in other games is they'll put an item up or the price fixer. Once the item's up, someone can buy it and it's just gone. Because you see people price fix an item, it will just sit there. They're not going to sell it anyway. It's too high of an item. They buy out all the other ones, for instance. So that's on one side of things. The other question is, I really like sort of the trading side. I'm not opposed to this concept of not being able to reflip an item, because for me, it almost sounds like a pseudo item sink. It did, like GHAZZY was saying, it doesn't get re-implemented back into the economy. So this is almost like a way of another item sink, sort of like crafting. You mess up an item and now it's no longer a viable item. That's an item sink. This sounds like another way to have an item sink. Are you hoping this will have, pretty massive economic benefits with this type of system? Because that's what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah. You've got it. Yes. Sorry, what did you say at the very start of that?
I know it's a long-winded question. The first part of it was, when it comes to price fixing, are people able to decline offers? Like, are we going to basically see fake posts being allowed, in there? Yeah. How are you guys approaching it?
No, so one of the big things about the the Bazaar system is that there's no interaction by the seller once it's posted to purchase, and this is really important. Is that once you posted something and someone buys it, there's no, the seller doesn't have a chance to be like, no, I don't want to do that, or has to confirm it or something like that, because when you're going to the Bazaar to buy something, the response time needs to be immediate.
Sure.
You need to be able to say, okay, I found the thing I want, I'm buying it, and you've bought it, and it's yours. And that has to happen right away. So there can't be a confirmation window that goes to the seller or a way to decline it there. That timing is really important.
Good to know. Okay. That is exactly what I was kind of hoping to hear, to be honest with you. Sorry, go on. GHAZZY, did you have a question you're going to say?
I'm going through the chat questions because we kind of tackled most of the stuff that we pre-prepared when it comes to the bigger ones that's been tackled. So it's mostly chat questions. Like DM said before, the guys watching this live on stream right now, if you have any questions, fire away. We have a developer, we have Photon in the chat picking them out for us. So just fire away and we'll snag as many as we can.
I think there's one of the questions. There's a ton of questions in. I think Photon's put a ton of questions in here already from chat.
Yeah, there's so many. I can't even pick one.
Trying to pick the good ones.
One from the middle.
Good luck. Exactly. I'm not reading them.
I'm just gonna go right in the middle, and there was one that said, "Any plans on adding static endgame bosses / pinnacle style bosses for the endgame?" So let's start with that one.
Yes, big yes. 1.0 won't have them, unfortunately. I'm sorry. They didn't quite make it in. But yes, big yes. That is that is my great sorrow of content that will not be at 1.0. But yes, we are very interested in having static benchmark content for difficulty for endgame bosses, things like that. Technically, there's basically nothing right now that does it. There's kind of one, but there's some variables to it, so it's not quite there. And it's probably not the quite at the level some people want to have as like a pinnacle boss. So we want to have those big, like, what's Diablo without Diablo, right? Like we need to have those.
Well,
it would be D4.
I'm still stuck in Diablo 2. Okay, sorry. I was talking like original Diablo 1. What's Diablo 1 without Diablo? Like. Okay. I'm sorry, poor choice.
No, you're good. You're good. Go. Moving along. Blasting right there.
We definitely want to have we definitely want to have pinnacle bosses, and there's no shortage of ideas floating around internally for like people pitching ideas for pinnacle bosses. The hard part for us is going to be which boss do we implement, which boss do we go with. We do also want those pinnacle bosses to have like story tie-ins and some context tie-ins to the game and the world. And I think a really good example, and I always when I do my dev streams, I always use D2 as examples because it's the game I've played the most of anything. And the Pandemonium event is a really good example of the style of thing where you're going and you're finding like the organs and you're finding the keys and you're building these things together in the world, and then the end is this big pinnacle fight. And so a system like that is something that we are really, really interested in doing. And you probably I don't want to give a time frame on it, but it is something that we're really focused on.
Speaking of time frames, so I don't know how long you have. That's something we actually didn't discuss before that. So if you get to a point, we're going on an hour and a half here. Last interview we did was like literally 3 hours. So if you get to a point where you're like, hey, I gotta go, just cut us off. Be like, it's been good talking to you. We're not gonna take it rude at all. But in the interest of saving you some time, we can start rapid firing sort of through some of these a little bit quicker if you want. I'm gonna hit you with one of the maybe a harder question out of the way. A lot of these are pretty easy, yes and no type of stuff. But I'll hit you with one that's maybe a little bit more of a talking point. When it comes to server stability on game launch, this is something that is always like people sit in a queue and I rage over it and all that. How are you guys worried about, or are you worried at all about server stability? It seems like you guys got a lot of interest in the game. Every time that I'm streaming, people bring up the game, so it seems like there's a lot of both press about it as well as interest on it. So how are you tackling server stability come launch?
I think if a small part of us wasn't worried about it a little bit, we'd be foolish.
Sure.
We've been like, this has been we know this has been coming. We've all been around for all the launches of every big ARPG in the last 20 years. Like there's I've sat through every ARPG launch since PoE type thing. Like we know how these go. We are doing everything we can to make sure this is as smooth as possible, and we know that there's it's likely not going to be perfect. We're doing our best to make it perfect, but we don't know what's going to happen until launch day comes around. We've got we've got tons of we have third-party partners for different services that we use, and they all know when our launch day is. They've got people standing by ready to help us when we need it. Everyone is like, no one has time off scheduled for this time. Like we're ready to go for getting this built and out the door as best we can. Like this is a huge deal for us, and we are putting everything we have behind this launch. If there are problems, we are going to react to them as quickly as possible. We do kind of have this, and we are not resting on this whatsoever. We do have, like, if I'm going to compare this to some other launches that have happened in long time past that didn't have this, which caused problems, is we do have an offline mode where people can physically play the game if they purchased it. Like it will turn on and run for them, even if everything crashes and burns.
An important point of clarity real quick about the offline mode. I know people are going to wonder this. Offline mode, can you start in offline mode, then migrate your character to online mode in order to bypass this issue?
No, I'm sorry.
There you go.
Unfortunately, offline characters are offline characters, period. End of story. There are some really cool ideas on floating out there about like how it could be possible to do that. There's little tiny gaps in all of them, unfortunately. It's not happening. We're not pursuing offline to online mode implementation. I mean, anything can change. Nothing's hard set in stone forever, but like right now, unless something dramatic changes in the technology that exists in the world overall, offline is offline, and they're not going online.
Fair. And guys, you want to read off one of these, or else I can keep going. I got 3 or 4.
One.
All right.
Any thoughts on releasing a universal ascendancy with their own skills that any class can use? Acolyte base class, select an XYZ universal mastery. Is that something you have in store or thought about?
So it's something we've talked about. We don't have any specific plans for it right now. But that is something we've discussed as a possibility. We've talked about all sorts of things, like the things that come up in our design discussions of like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, like it gets a little out there sometimes. But yeah, we've talked about shared masteries before. We've talked about universal masteries. So like, we've talked about masteries where like maybe there's 2 base classes that feed into one mastery or something like that. So yeah, we've discussed it. We don't have any hard plans for any of them right now. But yeah, I think that would be really fun.
Soon.tm.
Yeah.
So something we're seeing getting added in PoE2 as well as D4, it seems to be something the RPGs are going this way. WASD movement, is this something that you're maybe, if I know this is very controversial, some people are like, get good, use a mouse. I come from MOBAs, I'm familiar with mouse movement, it makes sense, I get it. But there's also a lot of MMO players, of which I also was one, that really enjoy WASD movement because it's easier on their hands. So what's your guys' concept around this one?
Yeah. About 4 months ago, this topic came up for us, and we talked about it, and we were like, we don't want it. We're not going to do it. End of story, done. About a month after that, the topic exploded in other games, and we've gotten a ton of pressures or feedback, inquiries about it recently.
Sure.
And we're gonna broach the topic again internally. We're just too close to 1.0 to really consider adding it right now. So it's not going to be there in 1.0. I can tell you that for sure. It's not a no forever. There are a few pretty big hurdles for us technically to implement it. I know it sounds like, oh, it's easy, just do it, no problem. Like it's like wire it up, it's great, it's done, and we can get it functional pretty easily. However, with how there's a few other adjoining systems in our game that would cause it to look really bad on screen. And the quality level that we want for the game would not allow us to add that to the game without fixing these other things that go with it. So this is not a small feature for us to implement, which is the main reason why it's just out of the question for 1.0. It's not happening.
Sure, fair enough.
And so I think that there's more conversation to be had with it internally before we make our next decision on it and
Sure.
And such. But
Thanks for tackling that one.
Yeah.
So in terms of, you mentioned looks of the game there, so I'm going to read off another similar one here. Are we expecting to see, as the game continues to develop, small incremental graphical improvement changes, or is this the type of thing where the engine doesn't allow for it? What's development on that side?
Definitely. 1.0 has some great visual updates to it. Every time, so I do our Friday dev stream, and every time I do that, I play on the live version of the game, and I put it up, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is what it looks like. Okay, fine. So I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty excited about what's going to be there for 1.0 for everyone. It's just so many little things. And there's little things that I'm sure a lot of people won't even notice, but it does look a lot better. We're always trying to make the game look prettier, look crisper, look more exciting, more interesting, all these sorts of things. And that will not stop. We are going to keep making the game look better. There are some limitations on things we can use, tools we can leverage based on the engine we're using right now. We are looking at updating that. That's a long process for us, so we are working on that. But it's we're not sure when that's going to finish, and when it does, we'll have new tools and it'll look even prettier again. So yeah, that's an ongoing process that we are going to continue doing.
A question I know, I saw a chat just now, is about the buy-to-play versus free-to-play aspect. I'm not sure exactly how you have it right now, what the plan is for 1.0, but I do know you had a time frame in the past where you would allow players to play for free up to a certain level, and then if they decided, hey, I like this, but if you continue playing, now you're going to have to buy the game. And then obviously, as you've mentioned in the past, all the transmogs or MTXs, they are not going to be any pay-to-win features whatsoever. They're cosmetic entirely, or exclusively. I can't even speak anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
The question is, will there be the feature of allowing players to play for free up to a certain level before they buy the game to play?
We don't have, so that was a plan. It is not something we're planning right now. So we that was from like a long time ago. That was something we initially pitched when we were talking about the game to start with, and something we talked about for quite a while. That was dropped. Oh, I don't know how long ago now. Quite a while ago that was dropped. And a big part of that, I think, is I think the switch to Steam helped with that a fair bit, with the like you can, if you really don't, if it's not working on your PC, a big part of that that little preview window is, making sure it runs on your computer, not like buying it and you can't play it type thing. Steam does have that automatic refund window where, like if it doesn't work, you can just good to go. So like that's not a concern for us anymore, which was a big part of that time frame. We have done like free weekends before, things like that, to get people into it, to like so they can try it before they buy it, that sort of thing. And if there's a big demand for a try it before you buy it type approach, it might be something we discuss again. It's not impossible, but we don't have any plans for it right now. 1.0 is $35. There's auto Steam price adjustments for other regions, things like that. Yeah, that's the plan going forward.
So one common question I'm seeing here is, because ARPGs are typically, league-based, season-based, cycle-based, and they also typically have campaigns. Some games allow you to skip, and some games say the campaign is a core fundamental part of the game. Which is it for you guys?
Right now, at least, it is a pretty fundamental part of the game for us. And there are no there's no adventure mode. That's the easy way to put it. There's no just hop into monoliths at level 1 and you do monoliths until you hit 100. Have fun. We don't have that option right out of the gate like that. We do try to really work in ways for people to level alts more efficiently, and so we are really trying to have that be an effective process for people. So you can't. Oh, I'm sorry. Just one sec. Just gonna cough.
Would that look like an aggressive?
That's a good.
No, I was just ducking out of frame. I'm standing.
The
so
cat down there just got vomited on.
No, okay. So yeah,
sorry. Go.
We do want people to be able to level alts a little bit faster than their first characters each cycle. And we want veterans to be able to level even faster and have your experience and have that process work in your favor. So one of the purposes of dungeons is they do act as a partial campaign skip. So you jump through a few chapters if you complete a dungeon in your leveling process. A recent change we made a couple patches ago to legendary items, may have been last patch actually, where legendary items no longer increase the level of the unique that they're put onto. So you can get these ridiculously awesome leveling items like you were talking about earlier, GHAZZY. And also just in multiplayer, you can just portal to a friend and you can jump way ahead. So there are these things that you can, like tools you can leverage to level faster, but we don't have an alternate campaign system to just skip the whole campaign or something like that. We do view the campaign as kind of a core part of the experience, and it's your character's journey. It's this your character's the hero of the story, and having them take that journey is important. And it also helps, especially people who maybe it's not their 10th primalist or something like that, and maybe it's their second primalist or their first primalist, and having that leveling process where they're unlocking new skills and they're trying out those new skills as they're leveling, and they're sort of like getting involved in those systems, they're respecing them and trying things out and seeing if they want to test out new play styles as they're leveling in a lower risk environment. And we think that whole process is really important. I mean, we especially want new players to interact with that so that they can learn and get acquainted with the systems and have more success in in-game.
What I really like about the campaign approach is that you don't necessarily have to do all of the quests. You have a X amount of idle slots to open, X amount of passive skill points to collect, and there are more quests that provides these than the cap of you getting them. So you can pick and choose which quests you kind of want to do. And this is great for the race scene environment, being able to choose which ones are the most effective to do as you're progressing. I think that the only question I have when it comes to that aspect of being able to minimize the amount of time you spend in the campaign for future characters would be the fact that you do get an attribute bonus for killing the endgame act boss in Majelka. The little, I don't even know what to call her, but the Medusa-looking chick, right?
Yeah.
So I guess, would there be any thoughts or any ideas around making that specific character bonus attribute account-wide, or something you can skip and have that on your future characters? Because the other aspect of it is very easy to go through and can speed up the process of the campaign but that one is still quite a lot of traveling without waypoints to get to the fight that you'll have to go through for your for every new character you make per cycle. Then,
Yeah, it is. It is only one all attributes, so it's not like a huge detriment in a lot of cases. But yeah, I can I think that there's room for so you bring up a good point about the fact that there is it is pretty far out of the way to get to it if you do want to take it. If you are trying to jump through the campaign a little bit faster. I think there's probably room for like a dungeon that the exit spits you out really close to that fight or something like that. And I think that would be a really good way to solve that problem.
yeah.
So,
I think that's fair.
one question here about the RNG of the game. Now, I know in crafting is RNG. That's sort of what makes people love and hate it, right? I mean, I personally enjoy dopamine RNG in the games. There is a question related to pity systems. What is your guys' sort of design intent around pity systems? Do you want it where it's you go 4 or 5 bad crafts in a row, you're guaranteed to get a good one? Is there anything around pity systems, and what's your guys' basically thoughts around pity systems?
We have historically steered completely clear of pity systems. We've never had one in the game. I don't think I've ever heard someone like really hard pitch one internally.
Sure.
I don't think it's something we're likely to interact with too heavily, and I don't want to say no forever, but we don't have any plans for any right now. I'll say that.
Okay.
That I would say that's very low on the list. So there would have to be a really big problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, for the record, I don't think an ARPG needs a pity system either. The crafting of the games is sort of what makes the games good, and if you could guarantee it, then you're sort of setting a baseline price at which you're going to get the good item, and you could just farm the resources and guarantee it, which puts a task in your head that requires you to think about, well, I have to get this many to guarantee it. So I agree with you that the concept is not necessarily something fundamentally important as we go through these questions here. Another one of the questions I'm seeing from the chat has to do with 1.0 launch. Now, I know you probably are trying to keep some of the stuff secret. However, we are seeing a lot of the questions related to monolith changes, power balance changes, wide sweeping class changes, and even bug fixes. Is there anything that you would like to address on these topics when it comes to the 1.0 launch?
I mean, yeah, so we've been doing a big focus for us these especially the last last like month or so, almost 2 months now, has just been like bug fix. That's just been what we've been working on. Is we content locked quite a while ago already, and we are just in bug fixing and polish mode. And there are like there's always more bugs to fix. But that is a huge focus for us right now, is just bug fixing. And as far as balancing, big sweeping balance changes, things like that. There are some pretty heavy balance changes that have happened. I would say this is sort of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Core fantasies that have been successful in the past will still be successful. So if you're like, I really enjoyed playing a necromancer build with a ton of minions, you're still going to be able to play a necromancer build with a ton of minions, and that's still going to be a ton of fun. We may have like shifted. Maybe it's like, I really enjoyed fire archer skeletons before, but now it's the ice archer skeletons that are really good. Like, so there might be balances and changes in how that shakes out, and so your builds are a little different, and you're designing things and exploring new options and things like that. But we're really looking to expand the options of what works and what's fun, rather than just take the nerf back to a bunch of stuff. I will say that there is a shift to in monolith stuff. There is a shift in the balance of where the challenge is coming from. So previously, a lot of the challenge had come from individual Echo node penalties, punishments, challenges. I don't know how to say it. When you go into an Echo, it'll be like when you finish this one, you'll get this bonus, but by doing it, all the enemies deal 20% more damage or something like that. The penalties or the difficulties, they're called challenges, that each of those introduce is lower and the challenge and difficulty that corruption adds to the whole system is higher. So you'll be focusing more of that power on, or more of that difficulty from corruption.
Fair.
So go on, Gussie.
I was just curious about a question that I've seen a couple of times in my chat. I didn't want to bring it up because I feel like it's more for you and me, DM, as being content creators.
Sure.
But since it was asked in here as well, I'm just going to go for it. And that is plans for Twitch integration extensions. And I think, just to verify, I think that what this person is asking for is similar to the armory system that you have in like Path of Exile. Like you can check any extension to see what the character is wearing. I think that's where the question is. I would like to add to that and ask about the possibility of integrations where we content creators can do some fun stuff with it in game with challenges towards the community. Any plans for this in any spectrum or aspect?
Yeah. I think we are pro Twitch integration systems. We have made zero efforts or progress towards it right now. So there's nothing in the works. There's nothing that's like, this is how it's going to happen or anything like that I can say. We like if I could wave a magic wand and say, yes, we have all those things, I would wave that magic wand and we would have all those things for sure.
Nice.
It really helps drive community engagement with streamers, and streamers have been and probably will continue to be a huge part of our game, and which is so great. And we want to have more tools for them to be able to interact with their community in our game as well. So yeah, I think that it's something we'd like to do, but we don't have any specific plans around at the moment.
Sure. Thank you for the answer on that. And I figure we go another 12 minutes, top of the hour, get you out of here around 2 hours, total. I don't want to take all of your day. I know we could probably sit here and ask you questions to chat. I'm sure we'll have questions all day long, but try to be respectful of your time here. So I'm going to try to hit you with a couple more of the ones that I know people are probably going to hope that we would have asked. I think one of these is, if you don't have an answer to it, it's all right type of thing. I'll let you off the hook. But I know that third-party tools are something that is always a topic of debate, regardless what game we're talking about. So when it comes to your team, where do you draw the line? Because almost everyone's going to say, if you have a website maybe that tracks the price of stuff, on average, that's fine. And then there's going to be some where it's all the way to overlays in the game to make the game easier and help you dodge skill shots, for instance. So where is the line for you guys in particular with Last Epoch?
So I think I'll start with our goals with third-party tools. Is that we don't want any player to feel the need to go use a third-party tool. We want people to, like, if someone if someone shows up and says like hey, I'm a new player, and they jump into our Reddit and they're like, hey, I'm a new player, what should I do? We want the response from the community to just be like, just start playing, have fun. Like that's where we want people to start with, is just go have fun. Having said that, there's already third-party tools that people have made that are unbelievably useful and great, and we love having them available to the community. So we're really appreciative to the people that have made those tools, and so like there's sort of this weird balance, and it's like, how far is too far with that? And I don't want to draw a hard line in the sand
Sure.
right now, just because this is not something that I don't have like a script in front of me to say what I'm supposed to say on this, but I would say the general philosophy on it is that if it's interacting with active gameplay, we're probably not huge on that. Like when you bring up things like overlays that are like telling you when to dodge and things like that, that's probably a little bit too far for us. So I would.
Tough question. Tough question. I know, especially because it's always a hot topic, etc. So I appreciate you being open with that one as well. GHAZZY, you want to throw one? We got about 10 minutes here. This is your last call for anyone that wants to get any of your questions potentially asked. We have more questions than we're able to ask Mike at the moment, and I appreciate your time so far. So GHAZZY, you want to hit him with one more question? I'll go one more, and we'll kind of go back and forth here, rapid fire as many of through the chat as we can before we send you on out the door, Mike.
I'll try and be
Yeah,
brief.
and I only want to bring one thing up, and it's more about making sure people that are listening into this live and watching it on YouTube being told that it exists, more so than a question. It has to do with the in-game guide. I think that it's phenomenal, but it is missing a few things. So the real question is here, what's the plan on making sure that the in-game guide has everything that is required or needed and further developing that aspect of the game? Because it provides the information for new players in-game without the third-party tools.
Yeah. So we've actually been there's been a pretty big push to improve the in-game guide. And so there's a bunch of updates for it coming in 1.0, so it will be better. And you're right, it's a good starting point, but it's not great yet. And I think it's one of those things that we're just going to have to update every single patch. As every time we add a new feature to the game, it's going to have to go into the guide. Every time we get feedback that people are lost when they're doing some activity, it probably needs to go in the in-game guide. And that's something that we're very much interested in maintaining and upkeeping and improving.
I'll do a very quick one that could be a yes and no answer here. Any plans around PvP? Is that something you guys thinking? Oh, I know it's an ARPG. I get laughed anytime I ask this question, but there are people that care about this, so I try to represent them. PvP, yes, no, what are you thinking?
I think it's a long-term goal for us. It's something that we've talked about since day one of having in the game. It's not something that we are actively planning and focusing on designing right now. It's something that I would love to have in the game myself. Yeah.
Okay, I'll hit you with another real fast one here. Solo self-found leaderboards versus group trade leaderboards. Plans around this?
Yeah, it's already in.
Okay, there you go. That was one of the questions. There it is. All right, well, that's would have avoided that one if I knew the game better. Let's move on.
Sorry. It's already in for 1.0. Like, it's not
okay.
already
1.0.
Okay. All right. I was like, I
got one otherwise, and that's cheaters, RMT, and bots. Plans to counteract this plague of games in general.
Yeah, I think that this is a huge topic. I think that attempting to squash it completely is a fool's errand that will end up hurting the players that are engaging with our content appropriately. So we don't have an intention of like stamping it out 100% no matter what the cost. But it is something that we take very seriously and do build systems around in order to deter it and build ways to detect and deal with it if we can. And you'll see there are little pieces of that built into lots of little things, like and even just coming down to there's a sticker price on the game, like that adds to it a little bit right there, right out of the gate. Yeah, there's lots of little things, and I think that the really obvious ways to use RMT in the game, with the systems we have now that we've recently introduced with the item factions, will be really easy to detect. Like, comically easy to detect it happening.
So they're going to be self-reporting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fair enough.
One question we got from Aaron Action RPG, a fellow content creator over here, wants to know Falconer or Warlock. What do you like, Mike?
I will be starting Falconer myself. It's the class that it's got near and dear to my heart. It's what I'm starting with. It's what I'm working on right now. But Warlock is a close second, actually, and I see GHAZZY was a little
disappointment here.
Sorry. It's don't get my answer as anything against Warlock or not thinking it's gonna be awesome, because it is really gonna be awesome. I am very excited for how Warlock's gonna shake out. I think it's gonna be a really fun class to play. Visually, I actually think Warlock's better. I prefer the visuals that we've got for Warlock. But the gameplay feel that we've got for Falconers is I don't know. It's that, yeah. There's a lot of mobility stuff in Rogue in general that I really, really like. And I'm a big fan of that. I just love having that high mobility on the class.
Love it. I'll hit you with another fast one here. We got 5 minutes left, boys, so put any last questions you got. I'm trying to get through them as quickly as we can here. Masochist mode enabled 1.0. Thoughts?
Masochist mode is dead. We have we do know that that players want to have an optional difficulty system, an opt-in way to make the game harder or something like that. And so we do have a plan for that. We do have something coming that will give you that style of thing, but it's not a character. It's not like you're not making a masochist character. You're not making a hard mode character. It is a normal character that can opt into a harder challenge. And I can't really go into details on what that looks like or how that works yet, but we've got something for that if you want that.
You want to grab one here, GHAZZY, while I grab the next one?
So there are going to be more MMORPG systems implemented is another question we saw.
Probably not much in the MMO category. I like when I think of MMO systems, I think of like
fishing.
Yeah,
daily quest.
I was gonna say when I think of MMOs, I more think of like raiding and
Sure.
like party specific content where you need a set party size to complete the content. I guess that just shows what I did when I played WoW a lot. We don't really have plans for that. We do still intend for content to be completable solo.
Options to remove party members' visual effects for visual clarity, going back to the conversation on that earlier.
I can't guarantee that we can make that work, but I think that's a brilliant way to do it.
Understood. Let's see here, picking through. We have 3 minutes left. Going to get through some of these. Mob density. Go on, guys, see if you got one.
No, sure. Mob density is a good one.
Mob density increases something like other ARPGs in 1.0. Are you going to do anything about mob density? Okay, bigger, smaller. Mob density, are you okay with where it's at in the game?
We think it's a little low. We think it's a little on the low side right now, and we are increasing it. We're doing that in kind of two ways. One by just like taking some of the maybe bigger spaces or bigger levels and shrinking them down a little bit, cutting them up a little bit, improving the feel of the levels themselves, and then also moving spawn points around. There was a couple bugs where like some spawn points were like deleting themselves as like a failsafe because they were too close to other things, and we've like increased the tolerance there. So like just we're looking at many different axes to improve mob density, and it's not just crank up the mobs, which is one way to do it. But yeah, there is mob density increases that are happening, and it's not going to be a gigantic shift, and we've been slowly doing it. We're going to continue to slowly do it. Yeah, you'll see that's something that's going to change constantly, probably.
All right. On the topic of offline gameplay, will that be possible to do, say, a LAN with your friends?
We do not have any LAN support planned right now. The server code is we're not planning on releasing the server code, which would be and if we're not releasing the server code, we are developing an entirely new style of multiplayer alongside the one we already have, which is we've already gone through the process of designing a new multiplayer system partway through the game, and we are not doing that again. So LAN support is like, ask me again in 5 years.
Fair enough. So we're sort of at the last moment here, wrapping it up. So I want to leave it on a question that's a little bit more open-ended and gives you a chance to kind of bring up things that maybe you were hoping to talk about. So my question for you is there anything you're kind of excited to share, didn't really get a bit brought up, things you were thinking, like, I really hope they ask this question? Is there any of those or things you want the audience to know? It can be a personal favorite part of the game. It doesn't have to be some major groundbreaking revelation here.
I mean, all the stuff that I'm like really excited about is under hush hush wraps right now.
Fair.
So I can't really talk about any of those things that I'm like, oh, I can't wait for this. There's a couple more skills that we've been working on, not just Falconer Warlock. So if you're not a fan of those types of classes, there is there's a new skill coming to Shaman and a rework of an old skill that everyone hates in Shaman. And there's finally, I'm so excited that it's actually coming. Healing Hands is getting a skill tree. And and it's a good one actually. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I think that's the
There
big
we
thing.
go. I was able to pull a little bit more extra bits of info there that I'm sure some people will be excited by.
Squeeze it out.
So I'll pass it off to GHAZZY to see if GHAZZY, do you have one more question or anything to slip in here before we do the wrap up?
No, I didn't have anyone prepped. I think we're just past the top of the hour as well. So what I will say is, for everyone watching, thanks so much for popping in your questions. Thanks so much, Mike, for joining us. Appreciate that very much. Launch is coming very soon, 21st of February, right? Unless I'm going crazy. And for those of you who didn't catch all of this, you'll find the VOD on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/GHAZZY, and the entire VOD here on DM's channel. This is Tavern Talk. This is the second time we're doing a dev interview, this time with Mike from 11th Hour Games Last Epoch. Had a pleasure having you on, Mike. Thanks so much for joining. And
thank you very much.
I'm very happy with the questions I got answered. DM, how do you feel about it? I felt very happy with this.
I would just like to say on the way out, it is blindingly obvious when you see somebody who has like raw excitement and passion about the game they're making. So it is always, just as an added addition, it is always very refreshing, is I think the word I see someone. It seems like you love the game you're making, man. Like, you know, I know people that got passion in games they make, and I know people that don't have passion in the games they make. And you know, it's just nice to see as a user, you know, forget about me being a content creator, someone who likes to play games, like seeing someone who's got love for the game. It seems obvious coming off you. So I appreciate your time, Mike. Unless I'm going to throw it to you for any last words you want to say. Maybe you have a question for one of us or something you're curious about. Any last things you want to do here at the end, and then we'll let you go with the rest of your day.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. I had a ton of fun. I was just a little nervous starting up, but you know, I think everything went really well, and I had a blast. I guess the one thing I'd be interested to hear from both of you is, do you have a guys? I think I know your answer to this one, but do you have a mastery you're going to start with and a faction you're planning on joining first? What's the goal there?
GHAZZY, you go first with this one, because you probably already got your game plan sorted out into 13 different, you know, spreadsheets to min-max everything, right?
Not really, actually. I haven't decided on a build. I want to see the patch notes and everything with that first. Big fan of the Invoker class, Rune Master. I can't stop calling it the Dota Invoker. It's just lovely. It's fantastic. So maybe I'll do that. I do have quite a few build guides up on Ice Events already, which is not just minion builds. I'll have you know that. The Frost Lightning Claw build for the Rune Master is one of them. Love that playstyle. Definitely going for Circle of Fortune. I think that one of the things that is really the best thing in the RPG genre from Last Epoch, from my perspective, being an RPG veteran, is that I was, for the very first time in my entire life, incentivized to focus on target farming and self-founding items more so than trading. So Circle of Fortune to me sounds like the best approach for me ever. I'm very excited for that. What about you, DM?
You know, I'm kind of interested. The way I do my characters is I do it based upon like what kind of character. I'm a roleplay Andy is what happens. So, you know, I'll think about what kind of vibe do I want, what do I want, and I'm thinking about trying tank this time. I've really been getting into melee style builds. I've always been a mage Andy, you know, lightning fingers, ice primarily. I played WoW also, so frost mage, stuff like that, or maybe like a rogue with daggers. But I'm kind of thinking trying sword and board paladin is kind of what I'm thinking here. Try to do something a little bit more tanky, a little bit more supportive. I like that concept to go with it, and I kind of enjoy shields. I think they look cool, just flat out, honestly. So maybe that's kind of dumb logic, but I think I'm gonna try paladin.
Awesome.
Right.
Well,
sounds like fun. I look forward to seeing you guys in game.
All right, man. Well, it's going to be, once again, thanks for your time. Thanks, everyone. Shout out for everyone in chat that came by to watch this live. Once again, it will be posted. If you missed some of this, you can go back in my Twitch VOD right now and watch it if you want, or it will be posted on YouTube, which will be a much easier way to watch it in its entirety if you went over on GHAZZY TV's channel. Shout out to 11th Hour Games for hooking us up with the interview, and Mike for being here. Thank you, everybody. That's it. That's a GG. So that's a sort of
well played.
Appreciate y'all. We're going to head on out. This is where the call ends. We can keep going with the wrap-ups forever, but thank you, Mike, for coming.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks
Mike.
for having me, man. I had a ton of fun.
We gotta do this again. I'm just pointing it out. And I talked to Foden about it. We gotta do it again, man. Just make it happen.
Yeah,
before the launch.
Before launch, okay.
Oh yeah, before the launch. Like
after the Masters are all spoiled.
Yeah. After Master Spoils, we got the patch notes, so we can start talking about the nitty gritty. How about
Patch
that?
notes will be pretty close. I don't know when that's going to be happening, but usually it's pretty close to launch day, so it'll be that'll be an 11th hour interview.
Ooh,
All right.
I love the sound of that.
Very nice.
Okay, I'm gonna run out of here. I'll
Yep.
see you guys later.
All right. Cheers.
All right,
Bye bye,
cheers, man.
everybody. Thanks for coming by. Much appreciated.